welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. In this episode, I interview Mike Dickerson from ClickDimensions and get his take on what makes a successful ISV and advice for other ISVs out there looking to enter the marketplace and really get on the Power Platform. This is a candid interview. It's the first time I've really walked away from my notes quite considerably, as a lot of my history in dealing with Click kind of came to the fore, and I asked questions about, the way that Click are moving forward and the real opportunity and runway that lies ahead of them. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Please feel free to leave feedback, comment. I'll always engage with any question that I get across any social media channel. You can find me just by searching for NZ365 Guy. But if you want to look at the show notes, nz365guy.com/58 is where you'll find the details of this show. Feel free to comment on that post with anything that is of interest. And with that, let's hear from Mike. Mike, welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show.
Hey Mark, it's great to be with you.
Excellent. Mike, you're running the most successful ISV in market. How did you become the market leader?
Wow. I think the guys that started the company, who, for your listeners who don't know, it's a fantastic and humble story, but they did a couple of things really, really well. First of all, they picked a particular niche in the market. They made a bet on Dynamics, which was both a technology bet and ultimately a go-to-market bet, and they just focused relentlessly. They also had some particularly good timing. And, as I look back I've now almost been here 2 years, and I look back on the 8-year history of the business. There are just a couple of things that those two guys and the founding team really did right that allowed the company to grow at incredible speed, very quietly. For those of us in the Microsoft Dynamics ecosystem, people know ClickDimensions, but in the larger MarTech world where there's 7,000 companies, ClickDimensions is probably one of the largest marketing automation firms that people outside of the Dynamics universe have never heard of.
Yeah. So true. So tell us a bit about you, Mike. Where do you come from? Where do you live? And kind of what do you do for play when you're not actually working?
Yeah, well, I live in Atlanta, Georgia now, but I grew up just outside of Washington, D.C., and I spent a good bit of time on the West Coast in California. I've been at ClickDimensions since the end of January 2017, and prior to that, I had sort of two phases of my professional career. Right before ClickDimensions, I was EVP of the global division of a conferencing and collaboration company, New York Stock Exchange company, that dealt with the largest global companies in the world. I was there for about 10 years. But prior to that, my career had been all in venture capital and startups across a variety of different technologies, from voice over IP to cybersecurity, and even a different kind of software business. So getting back to ClickDimensions, it for me was great fun to go from dealing with companies with tens of thousands of employees on a global basis to dealing with more mid-sized companies, where it's a little more real and it's a little less sterile. So it's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. So what attracted you to take on the role, and what attracted you? Not just the role, but actually what attracted you to Click?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple things that really stood out. First, from a company life cycle perspective, ClickDimensions was right in an area that I love, which is rapid scaling. And rapid scaling, it's very different to take a company from, pre-revenue to getting your first customers to getting to a little bit. That takes a certain set of skills to get product market fit, et cetera. And that's a kind of challenge. It's not easy. But the executional challenge is to take a company which was doing a little less than $20 million when I joined and try and get it to, do over $100 million. That is a different set of challenges. So that was one thing that interested me. A second thing that interested me was that as I looked out at the MarTech landscape and these 7,000 companies out there, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos and a lot of complexity. And what I saw an opportunity that these guys had built at ClickDimensions was an opportunity to sort of simplify some things, both on the application side, the data side, reduce the cost, and build a much more effective and cost-effective and efficient MarTech stack, but do it in a domain that was a little less frothy from a competitive perspective than, say, the Salesforce universe. And what I also saw, from a financial characteristics, or not so much financial, but from a go-to-market perspective, what the folks at ClickDimensions had harnessed, and I'll use that word, was an amazing distribution network. And you asked what made ClickDimensions successful, and I was talking about the early things. The partner network that ClickDimensions built is something that I'm in awe of still to this day. And why is that important? If you look at most MarTech companies, the biggest challenge they have is acquiring customers. So lots of people with great technology. ClickDimensions, for a variety of reasons, both skillful and timing, built this partner network that's really amazing in terms of its reach. And so the idea that you could get global scale by leveraging this network, and that you had a company that already had great momentum, but that was at its, sort of some of those key scaling points, those things were interesting to me. And then the final thing is that, if you like chess games and if you like strategy games, this one is fantastic because, and this is, our largest vendor is our most important strategic partner. Our product doesn't work without their product. We have a competing offering. One of their offerings competes with one part of our portfolio. We share a sales channel, and they're the largest software company in the world. So if you want to play an interesting strategy game, this is certainly one to pick. And this is now the third time that I've sort of done this this partnership with Microsoft. So I think that's the final thing that really drew me in.
So just touching on what you talked about there, creating, or having in place a massive partner channel, which is, how I originally came across a product was at a trade show in Queensland, Australia, and it would have been 6-7 years ago. I'd flown over from New Zealand, and I met John as he was showing off his brand new product, and just stayed in touch. He, as you say, built a massive connection. Chantal then became my account manager while I, grew my business in Australia, and, got to know Brad and people like Matthew and Megan through that time there. So how is it possible to scale and, if you like, get that engagement with such a wide partner base across the globe? What were the keys to building that?
First of all, I'm smiling because of the names that you've just reeled off. There's some fantastic people, and that's absolutely part of it. And one of the cool things, as I was saying, for me to come from, a very, a world where you have relationships with Citibank and Bank of America and these big companies who are very corporate, and then coming to a company that has really deep, meaningful personal relationships, with people like Brad and Chantel and Matt Whitteman and Megan. So the people were definitely a big part of it, and it remains a big part of it. And, I've been the beneficiary and try to, be a good steward of those relationships. And I think that was a necessary condition. But there was also something that I think was a unique timing element, which was that as, Microsoft was, still digesting Great Plains and AX, and Dynamics was its own, little unique and quirky community within the broader Microsoft machine. There was a point in time opportunity where Dynamics partners were fighting like heck to win business over Salesforce and some of the other competitors. And the Microsoft portfolio at that time was missing a key element, especially against Salesforce, if you think about ExactTarget and Pardot. And so, the value proposition was, hey, look, we will help you not only provide a product for your portfolio, but we'll help you sell the marketing side of this overall story to your customers, and we will be a force multiplier for you partners. So I think that on the outbound, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, if because for me, I'm looking back over time. For a certain set of partners on an outbound basis, it was great. We've got somebody who can help us be more competitive. But there's another thing. There were periods where as many as 20 partners a month would call in and say, hey, we'd really like to register to be a partner. We sold your product, but we're not even sure what it does, because the gap was that important to fill. Now, I don't want to over dramatize it, but there was a bit of that. And the only reason I say that is that to go out and build a partner network that has 600 folks, 600 partners with whom we've done business in the past 12 months. That would be if you were starting from scratch today, I think that would be an almost impossible feat.
Exactly. So in looking back and how that came about, what grew that? Was it purely your website was, engaging with these partners, or was it that they were just, the word of mouth caught on, or were there other tactics or strategies in play that kind of allowed you to develop this kind of very strong partner engagement focus?
I think it was probably two things. It's people and word of mouth. And the people, you mentioned John Gravely, who was one of the co-founders, did a fantastic job of evangelizing and had been in the early days of the, Dynamics sort of birth, and leveraged his connections to bring in other people like Brad Burks, who, for your listeners who don't know, I think you were part of convincing him to move to New Zealand.
I think his wife did that.
Well, there is that. But a funny story for another time. But people like Brad, who had a fantastic channel mindset, was able to recruit some other folks who had been in the channel organization or around the channel organization at Microsoft. And so those folks had a huge network and they worked it. And then they went to events. I know we just had Extreme 365 and, ClickDimensions was one of the first sponsors of the first Extreme. So that was part of it. And then you got a multiplier effect. The Dynamics community, as you know, because you're, pretty entrenched in it, is a very connected collegial group. And word of mouth, once it got, hey, you can trust these guys. These guys are, they're scrappy, like us Dynamics partners, and they're good people. That word of mouth was super, super important.
Yeah. So true. So you joined the company around about 2 years ago. What's the journey been like in the last 2 years?
Yeah, well, there have been a couple things. I mean, first of all, is I just can't, say enough. Great people. The culture inside the company, the friendliness, the approachability, the honesty, the sincerity, the humbleness has been fantastic. And the partner community has also been great. I mean, I have a very strong impression of my first Extreme in Lisbon, and I've been with the company maybe, just over 30 days. And it was like going to a love fest or an old, a school reunion. I would see these folks who'd been with ClickDimensions, and then there would be partners. And there was, just such fondness for the individuals and deep personal relationships, and just a lot of goodwill for ClickDimensions. And man, you're a lucky person if you can fall into that. But that's been the fun part. The work part, and it is work, is that there's a massive amount of change, probably in three areas. One is catching up with company growth, and we can probably dive into that a lot more. I mean, this is as I said, a fantastic startup story between one guy in his basement and another guy in his parents' apartment typing code. And there was not a lot of there was no institutional venture capital or any of the sort of assistance that one would normally see in a tech company to grow this fast, scale globally. So there's been a lot of catching up to the growth, and we can talk about that. Second thing is there's been, a lot of change in dealing with Microsoft changes. And Microsoft changes have, I'm sure that's going to be a really interesting topic for your listeners. There's both technology and strategy that we're all living with, all for the good, but it is change. And then the final thing is there's been a pretty massive sort of awakening, a change, and we're still in the early days of it in terms of digital marketing and marketing in general, particularly in the B2B space. So dealing with company change, Microsoft change, marketing change, while you're trying to continue to grow a company at hyper speed and stay profitable, that's kept me busy for the past 2 years.
Yeah. So just touching on some of the strategy ones, Microsoft purchased a company, Marketing Pilot, and we saw kind of what happened to that. I know that at that time, Click was a bit worried, even probably told by certain folks to be worried, and yet it was almost like it was a booster strategy that the more, Microsoft and the community talked about marketing, the bigger Click seemed to grow. Now, we're kind of once again in a deja vu type moment where Microsoft has its own product again. And is it the rising, tide is floating all boats, or what are you seeing happen?
Yeah, well, I think there is absolutely a notion that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think there are some similarities between the marketing pilot transaction, the Adobe transaction, and the launch of the marketing app. And, I'll sort of tease apart a couple of those things. I think if I were looking at a big boost, the Adobe announcement actually has been probably the biggest boost, because a lot of effort around marketing and why Dynamics could be a good platform for marketing. And the Adobe product is fantastic. It's for a different segment of the market, usually B2C, big companies. And so the good news is it created a lot of excitement. But, I joke with some of the guys at Adobe, they've been a fantastic lead source. They actually, it's helpful for them when somebody has a smaller budget and a smaller, need. It's better for them to just say, go talk to ClickDimensions, because it relieves them of the sort of unpleasantness of saying, hey, you're not big enough for us to worry about. With marketing pilot, I think, there's probably some channel confusion, but there was also some product market confusion there. I think with the marketing app today, which is a much better product than Microsoft has done before, if you're just looking at a features perspective, the good news is there has been more of a conversation about marketing, and we'll talk about how we position ourselves about that. But Dynamics is a different game today. Dynamics is a platform company. And that really makes a difference, because it's part of their strategy, from Satya to James Phillips, who I'm a big fan of, said, look, this is a business platform to build on, to build vertical apps, to build functional apps. Yes, Microsoft is going to have placeholders, reference implementations, whatever you want to call them, and try and sell them. But our bigger thing is to create a platform from which people can really grow. And so I think what that allows us to do is to tell a story that ClickDimensions is, solely focused on one thing, which is marketing for Dynamics. And so, within the, yes, we have to deal with explaining about another company that understands Microsoft maybe as well as we do, and namely the Dynamics marketing app. Yes, that's a little bit of a conversation, but it's the bigger story is a dynamic story, a platform story, and why marketing is important and why you need more than just product. So it's, I think we're still early days. I guess the marketing app went live last April. And, we're still seeing, a reasonable amount of growth. And we still see, the real benefit is the changes that are going on at Dynamics that ultimately create a great path for us going forward.
Yeah. So on the product that Microsoft's brought out, one thing that I sense quite strongly is that they're not going to integrate it to all the marketing channels out there. So what do I mean by that? They're not going to, so for example, if I'm on Salesforce, I can get a connector to Google AdWords because there's a tight relationship between Salesforce and Google to allow me to understand how my clients are engaging on ads, on ad spend, all that type of thing in relationship to the campaigns that I'm running. I don't see that anywhere in the near or even distant future from Microsoft's perspective, and I don't see it in your product either. Is that kind of a white space opportunity there? Same with like Facebook ads fully integrated to the platform, so I can drive the full digital journey end to end inside marketing?
Mark, you're 100% spot on, and you probably have a microphone hidden in our product strategy meetings. I think one of the things, as I said early on about what attracted me about the dynamic space is that I think there's an opportunity to put all of the components that you need to do an end-to-end, to run an effective marketing program end-to-end, from attracting anonymous digital citizens who don't even know that they might need your problem, to converting anonymous visitors, to nurturing those anonymous visitors, to managing communications during active pipeline, to managing the communications and the experience during when a customer is a customer and turning them into great advocates, and touching that both digitally and orchestrating the human conversation. That journey And the complexity of it is a reason why there are 7,000 MarTech firms. They're each trying, I have a sort of an analogy that it's like a bizarro world that we live in where there are an infinite number of or 7,000 car part manufacturers, but there's no cars yet. And so people say, my spark plug is the most important thing for your transportation. And there are 5 other guys that do have spark plugs. And my hubcap is the most important thing. And what I hope that we can do is really create, a simple car, maybe a Volkswagen that can take you from point A to B, that you can understand, that you can use, that is cost effective, and that comes with, a set of services and a way of knowing that are you really getting your value out of it, that we can do that more easily in the Microsoft space for 2 reasons. First, we're building on a set of technology assets that continues to grow that Microsoft's investing in. So that's super cool. The second thing is it's a less frothy competitive environment from a MarTech perspective. The cool kids want to play in the Salesforce land. And my thought is, just taking on what John and Corinne, who started the company, did, is use the fact that the Microsoft ecosystem, while it is a very competitive one, it's less competitive, frenetic than the other. And let's build it all out. You said something that is a reality that we live with every day. Is you said, that you don't have that end to end in your product yet. And that's one of the things that I look at that we have had to, as part of the growth challenge at ClickDimensions. This company grew, as I said, without, self-funded by the founders. And so, re-architecting and rebuilding the platform to be able to scale to handle 3,600 customers in 61 countries is challenge enough, plus to deal with some key changes in Microsoft technology, both of which are fantastic. Common Data Service and UCI, those are going to be transformational. We've been doing a lot of work back in the engine room that is not yet manifest, but when it starts manifesting probably towards the end of Q2 in the second half of next year, my hope is that what we're able to do in our future state when we get there is that we have everything that you need to do that digital journey, a reasonable representative version of all of that technology, that the data is already normalized and integrated, that it works behind one login and it's cost effective, and you've got to really optimize MarTech stack. That's what I hope we do. And that's different, back to the marketing app. The marketing app is really targeted at nurturing leads and, driving sales funnel. That is just one part of the overall picture. And, I think there's a much broader story, much broader opportunity. And again, it's fantastic what Microsoft has done from a platform level, because it gives a company like us the chance to say, all right, we are going to be the best at marketing for Dynamics. And there's a lot of white space, as you say, and there's an ability, Microsoft is a fantastic company known for its technology and known for its IT relationships. We've got the chance to, leverage the history of the company that's been built to date, but basically own marketing for Dynamics. And people think of us as a marketing company, and that's a little bit different than the way you think of Microsoft.
So true. One of the things that you guys have done well over time is creating content around marketing, as in almost teaching non-marketers how to market. And really for the, medium-sized business that can't afford their own marketers, it's kind of a thing that they need education on. Is there still a strategy and plan in place to continue to produce content to kind of meet the soft skills of using the technology?
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's an evolution of that. And, I can, as you may or may not know, I had a stint running an email business a little bit bigger than ClickDimensions back between 2006 and 2009. And at that time, people were just learning things about, the importance of subject lines in emails, and they were really getting what permission marketing truly meant. And what I saw when I came to ClickDimensions is and by the way, the business that I ran was very focused on B2C, and the sophistication in B2C, is from a digital marketing perspective is way ahead of B2B for a variety of reasons. What I saw when I got to ClickDimensions was a lot of, as you say, basic sort of training on how to do email marketing and stuff that, was a deja vu for me. I think the next level, and where you will see us, really focusing at in Q2, and we have strong launch plans around the going beyond just the basics of here's how you do an email campaign to here's how you evaluate the impact of your digital marketing. And this is kind of the holy grail, and I think that we've got a leg up in the Microsoft domain because it's easier to integrate the data sources. We've got the marketing automation was built on the Dynamics data model, and you got Dynamics, the CRM. Now with common data services, we can take that data model and we can start bringing in other applications, our own or other, and it just makes it easier to normalize. Why is that important? If you look at the folks who are trying to solve problems around revenue attribution, if $1 of revenue, where did it really come from? How much was impacted by the salesperson, by the support person? How much by the social media campaign 3 years ago? Multi-touch, all of that stuff. Being able to say, quantify in quantified terms and with believability. Here is the impact of my digital marketing mix, and have it be believable by CEO and CFO and head of sales skeptics. That's the next point where I want to go. I think we got to go from teaching people just how to do email campaigns to what the results they should be getting across their digital marketing space. And if we're going to be successful in that vision that you laid out, probably more articulately than I did about how you take over that white space, you need to be able to have a scoreboard that helps those marketers demonstrate that they are making a real business value. And that's a lot more than just your opens, clicks, and bounces. That's a very different, approach. There are a couple of great companies out there that have done that. Datorama, that Salesforce bought for about $850 million. Origami Logic is another one. Visible that Marketo bought. There's another company out there, Sweet Spot. That's a pretty great company. Those are all areas that are interesting to us. And I hope from an education perspective, we go from, let's say, elementary school level, that we get up to maybe high school level and start talking about how you get business results. So that'll be a direction you'll see from us next year, and I expect that to continue for the next couple of years.
So what about other channels? Like, you've been very strong on the email side of things, but we've got things like, which I know is not used as much in America, but, WhatsApp is a big deal. And, Twilio has now got a full integration, or they're being signed on. So that opens a massive opportunity. I know Apple are in, getting to the point that they're going to come to market very strongly with turning their app, that has been FaceTime and stuff, or Messenger, sitting on the phone for some time, Messenger specifically. And that's going to really allow for a B2C type relationship to be formed via businesses through that channel. Are you kind of thinking about those things and how that's going to impact what you do as an organization going forward to make sure that, if you like, as marketing trends are changing, that you're adding that new technology or capability, probably as a leader rather than a follower, just because you guys have been in that premium space and kind of had that sexiness about your business for so long?
Yeah, so I think, do we think about it? Absolutely. If our product folks and probably even our CEO had their way, there's a whole bunch of things that we would do immediately. But there's a little bit of reality from an engineering perspective and a sort of a channel absorption. So, what we go through in a product management section is, you talked about end-to-end marketing coverage. The types of things that we have to decide. Do we want to beef up our account-based marketing capabilities? Do we want to beef up our inbound capabilities? Do we want to beef up our, abilities to help our customers identify new prospects for them that they didn't even know about? There's a whole set of technologies in those part of the worlds. Do we want to add, where we don't have representation in our portfolio? Do we want to add those, or do we want to add increase from just SMS to WhatsApp and WeChat and other things like that? And of course, the lady that runs our product would say, in my Barbie dream world, she'd like to have it all. There is a little bit of a sequencing. And the other thing, back to just the real effort that's been going on at ClickDimensions, certainly for the past 12 months, has been core engineering to make sure that we've got a platform that is, updated for the changes that Microsoft has brought on, but also updated to be able to support not only scale, but all those different channels. And by channels, I don't mean, just WhatsApp. I mean all the different inbound technologies that we're not currently in. So we're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that over the long term help us, or not only help us, are critical and necessary to executing on the vision that you kind of laid out.
Yeah. So just on that technology piece, I mean, you guys, my understanding is one of the biggest consumers of Azure. Is that right?
Oh, that's right. Our CFO tells me that every day.
So, like, how much does, the new technology that's come to Azure, like, are you guys getting on board in the area of AI and cognitive services and how that applies? You're starting to tinker or try those type of things?
Yes, but again, it's a similar thing. It's a sequencing and engineering capacity. I think ultimately, one of the things that I'm so bullish about Dynamics about is that, in simple layman's terms, it makes it easy to collect data from different business applications and put it into a place that you can run machine learning and can, apply artificial intelligence to. It just makes it so much easier than, the AI projects that I've seen before, where it's, $1 million just to get the data in the right places to begin to, apply algorithms. The dirty secret about AI is it's 90% data manipulation and 10% algorithms. So that's part of our longer term bet on Microsoft. And we believe that not only moving the data is better, over, let's say, the next 5 years, it'll be easier to do that data movement using Dynamics. And the other thing is you can, when I look at some of the competition that we have out there, let's take Marketo, a great company bought by Adobe. Microsoft spends more in an afternoon on artificial intelligence research than Marketo can spend in 2 years. So we have that capability is out there waiting for us. Now it's just there are two sequencing things that we need to be mindful of. One is, our own engineering capability, and just as we talked about before, is what is the next most important thing that we need to add to the portfolio as we have it today. So for example, if we added WeChat messaging, I don't think that would be as important as, working on our revenue attribution and those kind of marketing performance management. There's some core things that we need before we get to the edges. I look at AI in kind of a similar way, and let me explain. I mean, there's some sequencing that we have to do, for our portfolio. Then there's the next thing, and you hit on this when you talked about education. AI is a double-edged sword when it comes to the education of our marketing users. On the one hand, most people, it's black arts and not really sure how to use it. Where we want to get to with AI is where we are using technology to deal with the fact that there's a shortage of people, I call them full stack marketers, who know how to orchestrate that journey from anonymous digital citizen to committed advocate and putting the pieces together in a program from a programmatic perspective as a technology, as well as a technological perspective. Things like, identifying your ideal customer profile, your segments, when you do messages. If we can figure out how to use AI to do some of those things that make for a great marketing campaign, then we have, just simplified a bunch of stuff for our users. I think that the potential exists, but again, we've got to get the building blocks in place. Once they're in place, I think we'll be able to really start to do that. But, you're seeing in a couple of places, I know there's a Versium product out there that does, if the people who understand it know that, oh, wow, that really helps me identify and find a bunch of prospects that otherwise I wouldn't have known about. And these people are likely to buy from us. If you can use AI to do those kind of things, that's important. And just, to answer your question, I think I look at our sort of plans over the next 2 years, embedding pieces of predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI into our core platform, is certainly part of it. But I think, I wish it could happen tomorrow. We've got some foundational work to do. But, once we get there, what we believe is that because we're built on Dynamics, because Microsoft makes those AI capabilities part of Azure, we're going to be way more powerful and far more cost effective than an Acton, a Marketo, a HubSpot, down the road.
Yeah, makes sense. How do you maintain or create culture in your organization? But I suppose since coming in, you've been in 2 years, there would have been a specific culture in the business. How do you kind of develop staff culture so that, they represent your company with the customer effectively?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. And I'll speak, generically about culture, my view on culture, and then I'll talk specifically about ClickDimensions. Culture is either something that people look at as touchy-feely, millennial kind of stuff, or, the folks like Peter Drucker who say culture eats strategy for lunch every day. And I tend to the latter, especially when you're scaling at hyperspeed. And here's why. If you've got a really well-defined culture, that sets the boundaries for how people are going to interact with each other and with their customers. And when you're hiring lots of people, especially when you're hiring lots of people in different parts of the world, it allows you to assimilate those people and make them and allow them to collaborate and work much more effectively than if you don't have those norms established. So that's a little wonky, but that's my view of it. And I think a company that's scaling, it's super important. Specifically at ClickDimensions, here are a couple of things that we've got. First of all, the founders and the early team, including a bunch of the names that you mentioned earlier, from Brad Burks and Chantel and Matt and Megan, they were all just really great people. And by really great people, I mean that they were genuine, they were approachable, they were likable, and there is that. People tend to attract people who are like themselves. So before I got here, there was just a really good group of folks that you would say, yeah, those are nice people. I enjoy spending time with them. They're sincere. I trust them. I'm rooting for them. I think to get to sort of the next level, what I've tried to add to the mix while keeping all of those good things is to try and do something that I think is really important in nurturing and growing culture, which is to be very clear about where the destination is that you're trying to go. So that idea of end-to-end, applications, simplifying the marketing stack, having a clear scoreboard, and providing the services around it. This is where we're going. That we're, leveraging the Dynamics ecosystem. That we're a partner-first organization. That we have ambitions to get, past 100 million. So if you lock in on that, that gives everybody a sort of a common, North Star about here's where we're going and here's how we're getting there. I think there are a set of other things that folks have figured out really help about, sort of behaviors and managing and empowering folks. Once you've given them the idea of where you're trying to go, if you can make clear what you're trying to accomplish and let them, figure out ways to get it done, not only do you get great ideas, you get great energy, and people are happy. And I believe in as you do that, a key thing, there's a great book written by a lady named Kim Scott, who was at Google and then ran Apple University. And she has a book called Radical Candor. And it has a pretty simple concept.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it is. It just really simplifies things. First care deeply and then challenge directly. And by care deeply doesn't mean you got to hug everybody all the time. It means really understand, Mark, what are you trying to do in your life? What's important to you? And just simply by investing the effort to understand that and then trying to shape experiences or comments that are contextually appropriate to what's important to you. Once somebody knows that, they say, yeah, this person actually cares about me and is invested in me, not in a tree-hugging way, but in a helpful way. And then the second thing is just be extremely direct. And that just, creates a really effective, high-performing culture. The final thing I think that we do is to really focus on transparency, to try and say, here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it, here's how it's working, the good, bad, and the ugly. And, you talked about ClickDimensions being a successful company, and it certainly is. But we've had some challenges with our growth. There's no doubt about that. And we talk about them openly, and, it's a very transparent culture. So having said, all of that, we started with good people. We have a focus on culture. We do, radical candor, and we try and be transparent. But it's a day-to-day job. As soon as you forget, to pay attention to that for just a little bit, things can go pear-shaped.
Yeah. So another thing, just, from transitioning from a startup organization into a maturing organization, one of the risks can be that the speed that the organization, the agility that it has can change. Is that a concern to be, maintain your nimbleness and accessibility moving forward?
I was going to try and make a joke about filling out forms in triplicate and expense reports, but sure, Ken. And here's where I think there's two areas that, as you say that, I sort of react to. One is the tension that exists between scale and responsiveness. When you've got 500 customers and one customer says, "Hey, I'd like a change," one coder can go whip out some code and deploy it. When you got 3,600 customers, if you don't have a set of processes, hopefully that have been automated, that you can, write code and deploy it safely without screwing up, the 3,600 customers, it's a lot harder. Once you get to a certain scale, you can hurt yourself by your agility. So if you want to keep that speed and flexibility, which is critical, and you need to do it, you have to change your processes to do that. And the danger is you put in so much process that you lose the speed. So that problem right there, we fight with every day. And I think, when I talk about the challenge to get from 20 million to 100 million, that is one of the central challenges that we have to fight. The second challenge that we have goes back to the people thing, which is, man, if I could work with 100 Chantel Schumachers or 100 Brad Burks, I'd do it in a heartbeat. How do you get those relationships? How do you scale and get hundreds of people that have those level of relationships? So, those are two of the challenges, because back from the startup to the larger company, there's a magic about being, part of the 20 people that fearlessly, moved out of John Gravely's basement and started this thing. How do you keep an emotional connection and an energy, and not just have that diluted to people who are just phoning it in? So that to me is even a bigger concern than the process bureaucracy.
Yeah. So I just want to switch gears slightly here and just talk about, being an ISV and running an ISV type business. Microsoft is now going through this transition where they're really wanting to move forward and embrace ISVs and say, come to our platform. And if you look at what's in the App Store and stuff, there's a lot of, should we just say, stuff in there that's underwhelming in a way. And what are your thoughts of, either startups or, as in people wanting to choose the platform to build their product from a, purely ISV, whether it be horizontal or vertical? What challenges do you see they have in the next 1 to 2 years to be able to get on and adopt and move forward with that platform story?
Let me ask you a sort of clarifying question. Are you speaking about Dynamics as a platform?
Yeah. The Power Platform. Sorry, not even Dynamics, but more the next layer down. Yeah, Power Platform. Okay,
so here's the reason I asked that is because Microsoft's been an ISV-driven platform company. Microsoft has for a while, whether it was with the developer network or whether it was with Azure. The change is that Satya and James Phillips have taken Dynamics and turned it into the Power Platform and are trying to turn that part of their business into a platform just like Azure and just like Windows work. So Microsoft has some of those muscles. I think it is really different in the business application side. So a couple of things that I see in the near term. First of all, as you've talked about, the underlying technology is changing to make that possible, and it's going to take time. It's breathtaking the speed with which Microsoft has recently, Dynamics team has recently, the business apps team has been producing good stuff. It ain't your father's Microsoft, but it's still going to take time. Common data service is critical to all of this, and that's still got a little ways to go. It's not like whatever Greenleaf or whatever the thing was a long time ago. This isn't a wishful thing. It's reality, but it's still going to take a little bit of time. So I think that's important. I think Microsoft is still working on some of the business models as well. pricing and access. I know, there were a couple of things that we looked at as we were making decisions about, some of the dashboards and data platform stuff that, we looked at what Microsoft was doing. We said, this could be great. It could really solve a problem. It lets us to do more stuff with our biggest partner. This could be great. And then we got to the licensing model. It was like, that ain't going to work economically. And so we went down another road, and 9 months later, they changed some of the economic models. So I guess my comment is that, there's no one size fits all here, but directionally every day, the Power Platform is getting better for ISVs. The last thing that I'll sort of touch on, which is kind of interesting, when I look at, I came from, a world where we were a really big consumer of AWS. And the difference between working with Amazon and working with Microsoft is if you figure it out, there's a way to use the go-to-market. And the go-to-market with Microsoft is unique. It is very IT oriented. So you got to figure out how to use IT to get into other lines of business, which can be tricky in and of itself. But there are a billion Office users out there. Microsoft has a lot of business customers. And if you figure that out, it pales well overshadows the technology decision. Last thing I'll say that, a lot of your listeners probably know, it's got, as I said at the beginning, it's an interesting, thoroughly modern relationship we have with Microsoft, with the marketing out there. Jean-Philippe had a global sales, marketing, and operations all hands call on November 22nd, worldwide broadcast from Tel Aviv, Israel, and they featured ClickDimensions. One of the Chantal Schumacher, who you mentioned, was on the broadcast with JPC, and they were telling the story of ClickDimensions, how it started with help from BizSpark One, how Azure helped us build the product, the relationships with Dynamics, and how this whole ecosystem works. And my point of saying that is that's a different kind of Microsoft from the Microsoft that where there was a full on the Steve Ballmer days. We're going to crush everybody. We're going to kill Netscape. We're going to kill this. To have the president of Microsoft talking about ClickDimensions to his worldwide organization, while there's also a Dynamics marketing app going, that's a very different Microsoft.
Yeah, totally, 100%. Hey, listen, we're running out of time. Let's get on to some quick fire questions. How do you think AI is going to impact your future personally?
If it can get my kids to school on time, I'm all for it. From our business perspective, as I said earlier, our goal is to try and use it to simplify a bunch of decisions and make a bunch of decisions for our customers that frankly, many of them don't even know that they need to be making. But I still think it's going to be an incremental sort of thing over the next 5 years where you see more and more and more of that happening.
What productivity app do you use every day?
There are two, and my Microsoft friends are probably going to get mad at me. I use Evernote, and I use a product called OmniFocus, and I probably couldn't live my life without those two things. OmniFocus is sort of built around David Allen's getting things done methodology, and those two are critical for me.
Yeah, I know them both. I had a lot of familiarity, but I've had a professional account on Evernote since the day it became available. So, very good product. What's your best purchase under $100?
Well, you told me before this that I couldn't talk about alcohol, so I'm not going to say that. I think that I'm going to have to say that my son's $29 Echo Dot has been fantastic. We haven't turned on the purchasing function, which has saved my bank account, but it allows him to set his own alarm. And in the 2 weeks since we've had it, he has gotten it. My 10-year-old has gotten himself up and gotten himself ready for school on time. So that $29 was well spent. Well
done. Who do you recommend as a guest for future on the podcast?
Wow. I got two. One maybe obvious, one maybe not so obvious. James Phillips would be a great one. I think, as somebody who, loves to study business transformation and leadership, if you look at what's going on in the business application side, I mean, the guy's done some amazing things in a company that's doing some amazing things. Another one, I got one, and I don't know if you've been around the ecosystem long enough, you might know this guy, Pat Fitzhenry. And here's why I would say, do you know Pat?
No, I don't.
He's been in the dynamic, he came from Solomon and, was way back, he's been with Microsoft, probably 20 years in the channel. And the reason why I think he would be really interesting is that he knows everybody and has seen everybody, and the stories that he can tell and the perspective that he gives, of the evolution of Dynamics and business applications would be pretty cool.
So he's a Microsoft employee?
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I had James Phillips on in February and on the show, and that was great. I'll probably look at doing another one with him, and now that the relationship's built a bit better, and But I'm very keen on getting an intro to Pat. How close are you to him?
Happy to do it.
Excellent. If you can just do that via LinkedIn, that'll be fine. Just introduce him there. Mike, it's been great to have you on the show. I know people are going to listen to this episode with extreme interest. Before you go, if people want to follow you on the social media side of thing, are you on any social channels?
Yeah, I'm obviously on LinkedIn and Twitter, and feel free to reach me at mike.dickerson at clickdimensions.com.
Hey, you'll be listening to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. Please consider subscribing to the feed on any great podcast player. Your host was Business Applications MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. Full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/58, and I'll see you next week.